Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I should have known something was wrong the moment we stepped into that house. I've never liked sleepovers. That might sound odd coming from someone who agreed to one that changed my life. But it's the truth. Even as a kid, I didn't like staying the night at someone else's place. There's something about being outside your own comfort zone, your own bed, your own four walls. But sometimes, especially when you're 16, you don't want to be that guy. The boring one, the scared one, the one who says no. It happened in the summer of 2013, in a quiet village called Barrowdell, a countryside patch tucked between forested hills somewhere in North Yorkshire. Nothing exciting ever happened there. No malls, no cinemas, not even a decent fast food joint. Just sheep, farms, and a single post office. And so, kids like me and my friends found our own fun. Mostly harmless, sometimes a bit reckless. I was close with this guy named Reese. We weren't best friends or anything, but we clicked over a mutual love for horror movies and breaking the occasional rule. Reese lived with his dad in an old brick house at the edge of Barrowdell, close to a stretch of woods we always heard stories about, the Elder Grove. Locals had all kinds of weird tales about it, and right in the center of that forest was a building called Hawthorne Manor. The manor had been a convalescent hospital, supposedly used for wounded soldiers in World War I, then later converted into a home for children with respiratory illnesses. It closed down in the early 2000s. Since then, it had become something of a local legend. Kids at school talked about it in hushed tones. Some said they'd seen lights flickering inside at night. Others claimed their older siblings had gone in and come back changed, silent, pale, withdrawn. I never put much weight in stories like that, until Reese invited me over one Friday night and mentioned the manor. "I got the keys," he said, lowering his voice like we were trading military secrets. "Proper ones. My cousin's a groundskeeper for the estate. He doesn't give a toss what I do." I remember pausing, spoon halfway to my mouth in the school cafeteria. "You're saying we could actually go in?" "Front door, no climbing through windows. Full tour, mate." That's how it started. Reese's place smelled like tobacco and old radiator pipes. His dad was out working nights, so we had the place to ourselves. We played PS4, ordered greasy pizza, watched Sinister, a movie I'd already seen twice but still pretended to be scared of for laughs. We were just two guys killing time until midnight. That's when we planned to head out. "Woods are quietest around 1, Reese said with a grin. "If something's gonna happen, that's when." I played along, laughing like it was a game. But the truth is, the moment we left the house and walked toward Elder Grove, I started feeling wrong. Not scared, not yet. Just off. Like something was slightly tilted in the world around us. We carried torches, Reese had a small backpack with snacks, and I had a portable phone charger, because even in horror, you don't want to be without Spotify or a flashlight. It took us about 30 minutes to reach the forest's edge. That's when the world seemed to hush around us. No wind, no crickets, just the crunch of our boots on dried leaves. We didn't speak much walking through Elder Grove. The trees there are old, so old their branches look like arms, twisted and reaching. The deeper we went, the heavier the air felt. Eventually we reached a clearing, and there it was. Hawthorne Manor. Massive, silent, broken. The place looked like it had been swallowed by the woods. Vines covered parts of the stone walls. One side of the building had clearly caved in. The windows were all boarded up except for one on the second floor that was open, curtain fluttering like something had just gone through it. Reese unlocked the front door with a rusty iron key. The creak of it opening was louder than it had any right to be. We stepped into a grand entrance hallway that reeked of mold and rot. The air was thick, heavy. It felt like stepping into someone else's lungs. "Smell that?" Reese asked. "Smells dead." He nodded. "Like history." We explored for a while. The rooms were mostly empty, peeling paint, Old furniture covered in sheets, shattered glass on the floor. But the deeper we went, the stranger it got. There were rooms with children's beds lined up against the wall. One still had a doll lying on the pillow. The paint on the walls looked scratched, not just peeling, like someone had dragged their nails down them over and over. In one hallway, Reese found a framed photo of nurses and children, dated 1952. All their eyes were scratched out. That's when I said what I hadn't wanted to admit since we got in. I don't like this. Reese chuckled but didn't argue. One more room, he said. Just one. We turned a corner and found a staircase leading to the basement. Of course, that's where he wanted to go. I'll go first, Reese offered, sensing my hesitation. If anything eats me, you run. Funny, I muttered. We went down. The basement was colder than above. Damp. The walls were made of thick stone and the air stank of iron. There were several rooms, storage spaces mostly. We found old metal beds, rusted IV poles, and what looked like an incinerator. I was ready to go. Then we found that room. The door was different, newer, reinforced, like someone had recently replaced it. There were faint symbols scratched around the frame. Not graffiti, not letters, just shapes. I don't like this, I said again. Reese didn't answer. He pushed the door open. Inside was a large open space, almost like a chapel. The ceiling arched above us, beams creaking faintly. On the floor, painted in faded red, was a pentagram. Real candles, half burnt, stood at each point. In the center was a small pile of bones. Not animal bones, small, brittle-looking finger bones. Reese backed up. Okay, he said quietly. Time to leave. We turned and froze. There were people standing in the hallway behind us. 5 of them. They wore black robes with deep hoods, faces completely hidden. No one moved. No one spoke. Run, Reese whispered. We did. We barreled through that basement like hunted animals, stumbling, tripping over debris. I remember falling once and scraping my knee, Reese grabbing my arm and hauling me up. We didn't stop running until we were out the door and deep into the woods. We didn't speak until we hit the edge of the village, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Back at his house, we sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, I said, "You saw them too, right?" Reese nodded slowly. They were real. I could hear them breathing. We never talked about it after that. Not properly. He moved away 6 months later to live with his mom in Manchester. I haven't seen him since. Sometimes I think about going back to Hawthorne Manor, just to make sure it was all real. But then I remember the way those figures stood there, still as statues, watching, waiting. I don't think they were squatting there. I think they belonged to that house, and I think it still belongs to them. So no, I don't do sleepovers anymore. And if you ever find yourself near Barrowdell, and you hear someone mention the forest or the manor buried deep within it, do yourself a favor. Forget you heard anything. I never had a big circle of friends growing up, and I think that's why I clung so hard to the few I did have. Back in middle school, my best friend was a girl named Lacey Wilburn. Lacey and I had known each other since we were about 6, but because her family moved to a smaller rural town about 40 minutes away from mine, Redcliffe, a quiet, heavily wooded place where you didn't hear sirens, just crickets, it became harder to hang out as often. So when Lacey invited me to a sleepover at her place during the spring break of 6th grade, I begged my mom to let me go. It would be my first proper night away from home without any of my family around. I was nervous, but also determined to prove to myself I could do it. "You have your charger?" Mom asked, leaning into the car just before I shut the door. "Yeah, I got it," I said, trying to play it cool. But inside, my stomach fluttered. I wasn't scared of Lacey, far from it. But her house, well, I'll get to that. Redcliffe wasn't like my neighborhood. It had long, winding roads with no sidewalks and barely any streetlights. Lacey's home sat at the end of one of those roads, surrounded by dense woods. The house itself was old, built in the 60s, and hadn't really been modernized since. Her parents were kind, a little distant, but nice enough. I didn't know the full dynamic of her family until I got there. Lacey had 2 older brothers, one of whom still lived at home. His name was Marcus. He was around 22 at the time, with severe autism and other cognitive challenges. Lacey never talked much about him, and I didn't press. But when I first saw him pacing in the hallway that evening, humming to himself, arms crossed tightly over his chest, I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't threatening, but there was something unpredictable about him. He didn't acknowledge me when I said hi, just kept pacing like he was focused on something I couldn't see. Lacey noticed my discomfort. "He's okay," she said quietly as we went up to her room. "He just kind of does his own thing. He won't bother us." I nodded and smiled, but inside I felt unsettled. That night it wasn't just Lacey and me. Another girl, Marissa, someone from her school, was joining us. I didn't know her well, but she was bubbly and loud, the type of person who'd talk over the movie to make jokes. I didn't mind. It made things feel a little less tense. We set up for the night in the living room since it had the biggest TV. The 3 of us made a nest out of sleeping bags and blankets. I chose the love seat near the sliding glass doors that looked out onto their back deck and yard. The deck had a few faded lawn chairs, a small table, and beyond that, just a dark stretch of woods that looked pitch black even in daylight. Lacey's mom popped in to say goodnight, reminding us to keep the volume down. Then she locked the front door and turned off the hallway lights. We stayed up watching Mean Girls and 13, going on 30, eating popcorn and candy until we couldn't keep our eyes open anymore. Eventually, the TV was just a dim background light, flickering silently as all 3 of us dozed off. Now here's the thing about me. I'm a terrible sleeper. Always have been. Especially in unfamiliar places. I wake up to everything. Pipes. Creaking. Even the hum of an old refrigerator can pull me out of sleep. So when I opened my eyes around 2:40 a.m., it wasn't because of some loud noise. It was just a feeling. The room was bathed in the cold bluish glow from the TV screen. Everything was still. Silent. Marissa was snoring softly beside Lacey, both of them curled into their sleeping bags on the floor. But something felt wrong. It took a few seconds for my vision to adjust. I looked around slowly. Nothing had moved. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. My throat felt dry. And then I noticed something outside. One of the deck chairs was no longer empty. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe one of the cushions looked odd. Maybe the moonlight was playing tricks on me. But when I blinked and looked again, I saw it clearly. A man was sitting in the chair, perfectly still. He was angled slightly toward the glass as though looking right into the room. No phone, no drink, no cigarette, just sitting, watching. My entire body froze. He hadn't noticed me yet. I was curled on my side, half hidden by a pillow. I didn't dare move. The man was older than any of us, maybe in his 30s or 40s. Dark hair, pale skin, wearing a hooded jacket. His hands rested on the armrests like he belonged there. And he was smiling. Not a wide, toothy grin, but a small, unsettling smirk. The kind you see on someone who knows something you don't. I held my breath. I wanted to scream, but something told me not to. I wasn't even sure my voice would work if I tried, so I stayed there, barely breathing, staring at him. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle, just sat there, watching. After what felt like forever, I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my face into the couch cushion. My heart was hammering so loudly I thought it would wake the others. I told myself over and over, "It's just Marcus. Maybe he went outside. Maybe he's pacing out there now." But I knew it wasn't him. This man looked nothing like Marcus. Marcus was stocky, blonde, with a round face. This man had sharp features, a narrow jaw, and dark, close-set eyes. He He didn't look confused or out of place. He looked deliberate. I don't know how long I stayed like that. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Eventually, I forced myself to peek again. The chair was empty, gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just stared at the deck, heart pounding, until the sky started to lighten with dawn. When the others woke up, I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to sound crazy. But when I finally told Lacey about it over breakfast, her face went pale. "We always keep the back gate locked," she said quietly. "And the deck chairs are usually stacked. Did you see him clearly?" I nodded. She didn't say anything more, just looked out the window with a tight expression. That was the last time I ever stayed over at Lacey's house. We stayed friends for another year or so, but we grew apart. Part of me wonders if she ever figured out who that man was, or if anyone else saw him. Maybe she was too scared to ask. I don't know. But I do know what I saw. He was real. And to this day, sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment and I glance out the window at night, I remember that face, that smirk, and I close the blinds a little tighter. I didn't grow up in the kind of neighborhood where things like this were supposed to happen. We lived in Ridgepoint, a sleepy, wooded suburb about 40 minutes outside of Richmond, Virginia. It was the kind of place where families left their garage doors open during the day and kids played in cul-de-sacs till dusk. Our street, Winterbirch Lane, was lined with old maples, and on cool nights, the breeze made the leaves whisper like they had secrets to tell. I was 11 years old, the kind of kid who followed rules too strictly and got anxious if the lights flickered. That weekend, I was invited to a sleepover at my classmate's house. Her name was Kira Dalton. She was a year older than me, more outgoing, and had this kind of fearless energy about her that both fascinated and intimidated me. Her parents were the sort who traveled for work often and treated Kira more like a roommate than a daughter. She lived in one of the larger homes at the end of our street. 2 stories, white siding, big porch, thick hedges around the yard. It always looked a little too quiet. My mom had packed me an overnight bag, double-checked that I had my toothbrush and inhaler, and dropped me off just before dark. I remember looking at the house and getting this tight feeling in my chest. Something about it felt off, not haunted or anything, just hollow. Like no one had laughed in it in a long time. "Have fun, baby," Mom had said. "Text me if you need anything." I nodded, waved her off, and stepped up to the front door where Kira was waiting, all grins and socks on hardwood floors. Inside, it smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and the kind of expensive candles adults bought from catalogs. Her parents were still there when I arrived, finishing up dinner. They were dressed like they were headed somewhere nice. Her mom in a charcoal dress, her dad with slicked back hair and that business smile adults wear when they're pretending to be normal in front of guests. "Emergency came up at the winery," Mr. Dalton said as he passed me my plate. "We'll be gone just a few hours, midnight at the latest. You girls will be okay?" Kira nodded before I could. "We've got snacks, Netflix, and Pepper. We're good." Pepper was their 4-year-old golden retriever. He was soft, lazy, and the closest thing to a security system in that house. Mrs. Dalton bent down beside Kira and kissed her cheek. "Keep the doors locked. Don't answer the door for anyone. Feed Pepper around 10, and if it starts to rain, bring him in. The kennel leaks." They left around 7:30. Their SUV tires hissed against the damp pavement as they pulled out of the driveway and disappeared around the bend. The moment they were gone, Kira turned to me with a mischievous smirk. "Want to do something not boring?" At first it was the usual stuff. Chips, streaming an age-inappropriate horror movie, talking about who had a crush on who in our class. Kira was fun. Reckless, but fun. Around 9:45, we were playing Uno in the living room when she looked up and said, "Want to check out the old lot?" I blinked. "What lot?" She pointed down the street through the front window. "The one past the dead end where the trees are. Used to be a development site before the builder went bankrupt. Just woods now." but there's a broken fence you can sneak through. You ever been? I shook my head. Isn't it private property? Everything's private until someone gets caught. She grinned. Come on, we'll be back in 30. I hesitated. I mean, every kid wants to be cool, especially at a sleepover. And even though my gut said don't, my mouth said okay. We grabbed flashlights, zipped up our jackets, let Pepper into the kitchen with a bowl of food, and locked the door behind us. The air outside was cool and a little damp. Clouds were creeping in. We crept down the street under flickering streetlights, passing sleepy houses and quiet porches. The lot was about 8 minutes away, past the final house at the end of Winter Birch. Overgrown bushes had nearly swallowed the rusted metal fence, and there was a section where the chain link had collapsed inward. Kira slipped through like she'd done it before. Inside, the land dipped down into an uneven patch of weeds, brambles, and half-buried lumber. It smelled like wet earth and rust. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, but our flashlights lit the way. We didn't go far, just enough to feel like we weren't supposed to be there. Kira smirked again. Want to play something creepy? I laughed nervously. Like what? Dare game. We sit back to back, take turns daring each other not to look around. First one to chicken out loses. I rolled my eyes but agreed. We sat in the tall grass, a few feet apart, backs facing. The wind rustled through the overgrowth. For the first few minutes it was fine. I started to relax, even found myself giggling at how ridiculous it was. Then Kira's voice cut through the dark. Hey, I need to feed Pepper. I forgot. I turned. What? We fed him before we left. No, I forgot, she said quickly. Her voice was tight. Let's go. I saw her face in the flashlight glow, pale, eyes wide. She didn't wait for me to ask questions. She grabbed my arm, hard, and pulled me up. We climbed back over the fence. I didn't even think, I just followed. The entire way back, she didn't speak. She walked fast, not running but close. Her grip never left my arm until we were back on her porch. She fumbled with the lock. I could hear her breathing, shallow, panicked. When we got inside, she locked everything. Front door, back door, windows, even the sliding glass door in the dining room. What's going on? I finally asked. Kira didn't answer right away. She sat down on the couch, staring at nothing. There was someone in the lot, she said finally. Behind you, crouching, in the bushes. I felt cold all over. At first I thought it was like an animal. But then it stood up and started moving toward you. I didn't want to freak you out. So I made up the thing about Pepper. We sat there, frozen. Pepper came over and nudged her knee. I didn't want to believe it, she whispered, but I saw him. You'd think that was the worst of it. It wasn't. An hour later, we were upstairs in Kira's room playing Roblox and pretending none of it had happened when we heard Pepper barking, loud, angry. Kira looked at me. He never barks like that. We went downstairs. Pepper was planted in front of the front door, low growl in his throat, hackles up. Kira crept to the window and peeked. There's someone in the yard, she said, backing away. My heart dropped. We ran upstairs to her balcony, staying low. From there, we could see the front lawn. A figure was standing near the gate. Heavy coat, messy, matted hair. Just standing. Then he moved. Not toward the gate, toward the house. We bolted downstairs just in time to hear the front doorknob jiggle, then the window next to it. He's trying to get in, Kira whispered. I wanted to cry. Suddenly, Kira's face went white. I didn't lock the basement door. What? The outside one, on the side of the house. If he finds it. She looked at me, panicked. Stay here. If he gets me, let Pepper out. Before I could stop her, she slipped out the front and vanished around the house. I stood frozen in the hallway, one hand on Pepper's collar, the other shaking. I heard the windows rattle, then I heard Kira outside fumbling with the lock. Then silence, and the door slammed. She came running in. "I got it," she gasped. Then, bang. The exterior basement door rattled. Hard. We ran upstairs, peeked out the balcony window. He was back in the yard. This time, his head was tilted, like he was looking right at us. Then he laughed, and dropped to all fours, and crawled, like an animal, around the lawn, still laughing. We didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then, after what felt like forever, he climbed onto Pepper's kennel, pulled himself over the wall, and disappeared into the dark. Kira's parents came home at 2:15 a.m. They were annoyed the doors were locked, confused about the mud on the front knob, and surprised we were still awake. We lied, said we played hide and seek in the dark. They laughed. We didn't sleep that night. We never told our parents. But I still remember that laugh, that crawling, the way the shadows moved, and how close he came. We were just two kids being stupid. We got lucky. Really lucky. I've always been close with my cousin Aaron. We're the same age, born only a month apart, and we grew up practically side by side in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside of Portland called West Grove. Small town, lots of families, brick houses with American flags out front. Everyone knowing just enough about everyone else without it feeling nosy. The kind of place where your neighbors wave at you, and nobody locks their doors during the day. That kind of place. Growing up, we shared everything: Pokemon cards, hand-me-down video games, inside jokes. If I was at school, Aaron was probably 2 lockers down. If I was at the park, he was on the swings next to me. He lived a 7-minute walk from my house. Sometimes I'd just show up without calling, and his mom would already be setting an extra plate for dinner. That Friday in May felt like the start of summer. We were 12, 6th grade was winding down, and everyone had that end-of-the-year buzz, like we were all collectively holding our breath for the break. I remember we got out early that day because of some teacher in-service thing. Aaron and I stopped by the corner store on our walk back from school, blew the last of our allowance on grape soda, chips, and a pack of baseball cards that turned out to be mostly doubles. We didn't care. We were just glad the weekend had started. We went to his house like usual. His parents both worked late shifts. His mom was a nurse, his dad was an EMT, so most afternoons it was just him and his older brother Luke. Luke was 15 and had that mix of being sort of cool and sort of annoyed by us all the time. But he was never mean. He was responsible, knew how to cook eggs without burning them, and their parents trusted him when they weren't around. It was around 5:30 when I got a call from my mom. I still remember her voice. A little rushed, trying not to sound too worried. "Hey, honey, Grandpa's in the hospital," she said. "It's nothing life-threatening, but they want to keep him overnight. So Dad and I are going to head over there and stay with him and Grandma for a bit." "Oh, is he gonna be okay?" I asked. "Yeah, it's just precaution. He had some chest tightness, but they ran tests. It's probably nothing. Listen, do you mind just staying over at Aaron's tonight? Luke's there and I already spoke to his mom, it's no trouble." "Yeah, that's fine," I said, eyeing Aaron, who was making some ridiculous face at me while pouring root beer over ice cubes. "All right, I'll check in later. Be good. Love you." "Love you too." I hung up, tossed my phone on the couch, and looked over at Aaron. "Guess I'm crashing here tonight." "Nice," he grinned. "We'll make a night of it." Luke ordered pizza around 7. We ate it on the living room floor while watching some ancient horror movie that Aaron claimed was actually terrifying, though we mostly laughed at the bad effects and dramatic screaming. The sky outside turned from golden to a deep orange and finally into full night. The windows were cracked open, letting in a cool breeze, and the whole house smelled like pizza and laundry detergent. It was around 9:15 when someone knocked on the front door. The 3 of us turned toward the sound at the same time. It wasn't a hard knock, just 3 casual raps, like someone who didn't want to intrude too much. "Expecting someone?" Luke asked. Aaron shook his head. Not a clue. He got up to check, and I followed behind him. staying back near the hallway entrance just in case it was a neighbor or one of Luke's friends. He opened the door but kept the screen door shut. Standing outside were two men, mid-30s, maybe early 40s. One was shorter, bald, wearing a reflective yellow vest. The other was taller, with dark hair and a scruffy beard, holding what looked like a clipboard. "Evening," the bald one said. "Sorry to bother you boys so late. We're with the city's Public Works Department. There have been a bunch of reports about water pressure issues in this area. Just wondering if you folks have had any trouble." Aaron looked confused. No. It's been fine. Mind if we come in and check real quick?" "Won't take more than a minute," said the bearded one, stepping forward slightly. Aaron shifted. Our parents aren't home. They're at the hospital with our grandpa." I winced. Aaron wasn't usually that bad at thinking on his feet. Telling strangers that there were no adults around was like page 1 of the What Not to Do rule book. Luckily, Luke stepped up behind us, his voice calm but firm. "Hey guys, appreciate you stopping by, but we're not having any issues. Best to check with one of the other houses." There was a beat of silence. The two men exchanged a glance. Not a no-problem glance, more like they were weighing something. Then the bearded one gave a tight smile. "Fair enough. Thanks for your time." They turned and walked off into the dark. Luke locked the door behind them and slid the bolt. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. "They didn't have ID badges or anything. No city van. Nothing." "Think they were faking it?" I asked. "Wouldn't be the first time," he said. "People use stuff like that to get into houses." We didn't talk about it much after that. Luke went back to his room and we followed. We played cards for a while on the floor. Then Aaron brought out an old sleeping bag for me and tossed it next to his bed. "Welcome to the fortress of Broditude," he grinned. I laughed even though I was still thinking about those guys. We talked for a bit, school, summer plans, a girl in our class who wore cat ears every day, and eventually the weight of the day caught up to us. One by one, we drifted off. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The clock said something like 3:14, but it was hard to see through the sleep in my eyes. I had to pee, bad. Quietly, I got out of the sleeping bag, trying not to step on Aaron's phone cord, and tiptoed to the bathroom. The house was dead quiet, the kind of stillness that feels almost too silent. I did my business, washed my hands, and flicked off the bathroom light. That's when I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a faint shuffle, like something brushing against carpet. I paused in the hallway. The sound came again, from the direction of the family room. For a second, I thought maybe Luke was up. But when I peeked back into the bedroom, both Aaron and Luke were still there. Sleeping soundly, Luke sprawled with one arm off the bed. My heart dropped. I felt cold all over. I hurried back to the bedroom, nudged Aaron, then Luke. "Guys, get up. I think someone's in the house." Luke sat up fast, eyes adjusting to the dark. "You sure?" I heard something, from the other end of the house. Without a word, he grabbed a baseball bat from behind the door, one of those aluminum ones. Aaron and I followed behind as he crept toward the family room. We moved quietly like we were afraid the floorboards would betray us. And then we saw them, two figures, the same men from earlier. They were inside the house. One had his back to us, rummaging through drawers. The other was holding a small flashlight between his teeth and filling a backpack with electronics. An old gaming console, headphones, a camera. The guy with the flashlight turned and saw us. And just like that, the flashlight hit the ground with a thud, and he pulled something from his jacket. A knife. A long curved blade. "Run!" Luke shouted. We turned and bolted. I swear my heart was trying to break free from my chest. We flew down the hallway, barely able to think. The front door came into view, locked. Luke's hands were shaking, trying to undo the latch while keeping his eyes on the hallway. The door opened. We spilled outside into the cold air, barefoot, breathless. And like something out of a movie, a patrol car turned the corner right then. We sprinted into the street, waving our arms like maniacs. The cruiser slowed, then stopped. The officer jumped out, hand already on his belt. "They're inside," Luke panted. "Two men broke in. They have a knife." The officer called it in. Within minutes, two more cars were there, surrounding the house. We sat on the curb, wrapped in the officers' spare jackets, watching blue and red lights splash against the familiar bricks of Aaron's house. They found the men inside. The window in the laundry room had a broken latch. That's how they got in. The cops guessed they had scoped the place out earlier and realized there were no adults. It was a gamble, one that almost worked. They were arrested on the spot. Turns out they weren't from the area. They'd been targeting houses for weeks, picking ones where kids answered the door and trying to bluff their way inside. Our parents came back later that morning, worried, exhausted, and grateful we were okay. It took a few weeks for things to feel normal again. For a while I couldn't sleep without checking every window latch. Aaron was quieter than usual. Luke got a little more serious. He still kept that bat behind the door. That sleepover started like any other. But we never forgot the night the strangers knocked. I always looked forward to summers in Bristow, the kind of sleepy town where neighbors still waved at each other and parents didn't lock their doors during the day. At 14, I had more freedom than most kids my age. My mom worked night shifts at the regional hospital, and my dad was often gone on transport routes with the trucking company he drove for. That left me with plenty of time to myself, and plenty of chances to hang out with my best friend, Caleb. Caleb and I had been inseparable since second grade. He wasn't just my best friend. He was family in all the ways that counted. We bonded over everything: video games, biking through dirt trails, building forts out in the woods. So when he invited me over for a sleepover on a scorching July weekend, I didn't even think twice. "Bring your PS4 and that new horror game," he said over the phone. "My mom and dad are gone again till Sunday. Whole place to ourselves." That's the kind of thing that would have thrilled most kids our age. And honestly, it thrilled me too. But now, looking back, I wish I'd asked more questions. Caleb's parents were different. Not mean, not neglectful, just always moving, always working, always absent. In the 2 years I'd known him, they'd lived in 4 different houses. This new one was just off Woodland Avenue, backed up against a dry, wooded ravine, secluded, the kind of place that looked perfect for peace and quiet. Too perfect. I biked over just after lunch. It had to be 98 or 99 degrees outside. My shirt was stuck to my back before I was even halfway there. Caleb's house looked sun-bleached and tired, with faded blue siding and a crooked mailbox. The inside wasn't much better. Bare floors, mismatched furniture, like they'd never really unpacked. But it had that familiar scent: laundry detergent, faint boy sweat, and the artificial sweetness of powdered lemonade. Comforting in a weird way. "Yo," Caleb said, answering the door in gym shorts and socks. His brown curls were damp with sweat. "Come on in. AC's busted, so we're gonna sweat to death together." I laughed. Solidarity, man. We opened a few windows, turned on every fan we could find, and parked ourselves upstairs with the PS4. His room had posters of bands neither of us really listened to anymore, and a small TV perched on a plastic dresser. The fan in the corner rattled like it was dying, but it was better than nothing. We gamed for a couple of hours before hunger got the best of us. Caleb suggested we hit up Big Al's Sandwiches, a little corner deli 10 minutes away on foot. "You sure we should leave the windows open?" I asked. "Nah, I'll shut the big ones. Just crack the upstairs ones a bit so the place doesn't turn into an oven. Who's gonna break into a house in Bristow, dude?" I didn't argue. I should have. But I didn't. We got our food, chicken parm subs and cold cans of root beer, and walked back slow, dripping sweat with every step. When we got back, the house felt just as hot as we left it. We settled into the living room, food in hand, YouTube blaring videos of pranks and ghost sightings while we ate. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, the heat finally started to break. We shut the windows tight and retreated upstairs. Caleb's parents' house never really felt lived in, but that night it felt hollow, like there was more space than there should be, a kind of quiet that didn't feel earned. After another round of games, we called it around 10 p.m. Caleb was already in bed, scrolling through TikToks with his screen turned low. I went down to the kitchen to grab some water. The house creaked in places, old floorboards groaning under my steps. I filled a glass and leaned against the counter for a second. Something about the quiet made the back of my neck prickle. The fan in the living room was still spinning, slow and rhythmic. I could see the hallway light reflecting faintly off the glass of the microwave. Nothing strange. At least not yet. When I got back upstairs, Caleb had already turned his phone face down and was curled into a ball under the thin sheet. I lay there trying to sleep, but the heat made it impossible. I shifted, flipped my pillow, kicked off my blanket. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes went fuzzy. Then, footsteps. Not upstairs. Downstairs. Slow, deliberate. Not like the house settling. I froze, my ears straining. The footsteps moved from the kitchen to the living room. Then, a drawer opened. Not slammed, not yanked. Opened slowly. My stomach dropped. I sat up, quietly crossed the room to Caleb and whispered, "Caleb, hey, wake up." He blinked. "What? Did your parents say they were coming back early?" He looked at me like I was crazy. "No, not till Sunday." "There's someone downstairs." He went quiet. That's when we heard it. Footsteps again, but this time pacing. Back and forth. Kitchen to hallway. Hallway to guest room. Then, silence. Caleb whispered, "Lock the door." I didn't need to be told twice. I padded quietly across the carpet and twisted the lock into place. Just as I turned away, the doorknob jiggled. I stopped breathing. It jiggled again, harder. Then silence. Then bang. Someone rammed into the door. Hard. We both flinched. Another bang. Caleb darted to the window, frantically working the latch. "Help me," he hissed. I rushed over, trying to lift the window. It was jammed from years of humidity and paint. I grunted and Caleb shoved his shoulder into the glass. The rattling continued behind us. Doorknob, then fists, then thuds like someone kicking. Crack. A piece of the door frame splintered. I shoved the window harder and suddenly it flew open. Cool night air rushed in. "You go first," I said. "No, you, just go." Caleb hoisted himself onto the ledge and jumped down into the yard. I looked back. Another crack, and this time the top hinge on the door gave way. No time. I climbed out and fell. Pain shot through my arm as I landed crooked on my shoulder. My side slammed into the grass, knocking the air out of my lungs. But I didn't stop. Caleb was already pulling me up when we both looked back. In the upstairs window, a man stared at us. His hair was long and greasy, matted to one side. His face was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, and his eyes were wide. Too wide. Like he hadn't blinked in hours. He didn't yell. He didn't follow. He just stood there, watching us like he was trying to memorize our faces. We ran, barefoot, through gravel and grass, straight to the Ramirez house 2 doors down. We banged on the door until Mr. Ramirez opened it, confused and alarmed. His wife called 911 while I cradled my throbbing arm. The police came within 10 minutes. Flashlights scanned the house room by room. They brought in a canine unit, the attic, the basement, every closet, every crawl space. Nothing. Not a single sign of the man. But there was proof someone had been there. Muddy footprints leading from the basement stairs into the kitchen. 2 drawers emptied. A steak knife missing. And scuff marks along the upstairs hallway from where the door had been rammed. They think he got in during the short window when we left to get food. That he hid somewhere and waited. Maybe to rob the place, maybe worse. The fall gave me a sprained collarbone and bruised ribs, but I didn't care. I was just grateful we both got out. Caleb stayed with us for the rest of the summer until his parents moved again, this time out of state. I haven't seen him since. Sometimes I still dream about the man in the window. Not chasing us, not shouting, just watching, like he had all the time in the world. And I wonder what would have happened if the window hadn't opened when it did. I was 14 the summer it happened. Old enough to think I was grown, but young enough to still be completely blind to real danger. That was the year I finally wore my parents down and convinced them to let me host a proper birthday sleepover in our detached garage. The kind of mature party my older brother used to have with his friends. The kind of party I thought would finally make me feel like I belonged. Like I wasn't just the weird girl at school with braces and anxiety, who still checked under her bed at night. We lived in a small town called Green Hollow, nestled just west of the Illinois border. Back then, the kind of crime people worried about was someone taking the Sunday paper from your driveway or maybe kids egging a house before Halloween. Our street, Cotton Creek Lane, was a curved strip of single-story homes, each with neat lawns and neighbors who still borrowed sugar from each other. It was safe. Predictable. My parents had converted our detached garage into a sort of second living space. Not fully finished, but not raw either. It had insulation, a bathroom, a ceiling fan, even an old TV mounted in one corner. The garage door was still the roll-up kind, just with a latch and lock on the inside. And the windows, 4 small rectangle panes across the west wall, had never been given curtains, even though I'd asked a dozen times. Normally, I wasn't allowed to sleep out there, but it was my 14th birthday. I'd planned the whole thing. 4 of my closest friends, movies, snacks, scary stories, sleeping bags lined up like a slumber party in a teen movie. My mom was hesitant, but my dad caved when he saw how much it meant to me. "You lock that garage door from the inside, okay?" he told me as we unloaded our sleeping bags and boxes of candy. "You hear anything weird, you come inside immediately. No games after lights out, that door's not insulated." "I know, Dad," I said, rolling my eyes. "We'll be fine." I didn't know what "we'll be fine" meant. Not really. Not until later. It was me, Isla Porter, and 4 of my closest friends from school. Lena, who was tall and quiet and always smelled like lavender lotion. Rachel, who was a little too into astrology and brought a whole box of tarot cards for fun. Joe, the class clown with short curly hair and a piercing in one ear. And Madison, who was sort of my best friend by default since we'd known each other since kindergarten. We were all different types of girls, but that night we were just kids, giggling over Sour Patch Kids and watching The Ring on an old DVD player someone's older brother had donated to the garage months ago. By the time 10:30 rolled around, we were wired with sugar and pretending to be sleepy, so my mom wouldn't come out and bust us for still being awake. I made a big show of turning off the lights at 11 like my dad told me. We even faked snoring for a minute. Then Joe whispered, "Hide and seek, lights off, no peeking." We didn't even hesitate. Round 1 was easy. Rachel hid behind the bathroom door. Lena got found first, hiding under the card table. I tucked myself behind the mini fridge near the corner of the garage and waited, heart thumping like it always did during hide and seek in the dark. The kind of fear that was exciting but safe. By round 3, things had started to feel different. Joe was it. I remember that because I could hear her counting out loud from the middle of the garage. 1, 2, 3. No peeking. I swear to God I will stab your sleeping bag if you peek. We all laughed. Typical Joe. I was crouched behind a tall wooden cabinet that stood next to the garage's roll-up door. It was the kind of spot where you had to wedge yourself in to stay hidden, and the metal ridges of the door pressed cold against my back. I could hear someone giggling faintly near the bathroom. Then I heard it. Another laugh. Right behind me. It was so close I felt the air shift. A small exhale, maybe. My heart jumped. I held my breath and didn't move. No one could be behind me. There wasn't room. Another giggle. I squeezed out and crept to the center of the garage. From there I could see the bathroom door, the card table, the sleeping bags, but nothing out of place. The moonlight streamed in weakly through the windows, just enough to paint shadows on the floor. Then one of those shadows moved. It passed directly in front of the farthest window. Just a shape, slow and tall. I froze. My first thought was, Dad. He'd probably come out to check if we were still awake. Joe, I whispered, bumping into her as she crept behind the card table. Someone's outside. She giggled. Dude, did you see Rachel jump when I grabbed her leg? No, I mean someone's outside the garage. That sobered her. We both crouched low and watched the window. The shadow was still, like it was waiting. We rounded everyone up and slid quietly back into our sleeping bags. It felt safer to pretend to be asleep. But the shadow didn't move. And then we heard scratching. It started soft, like someone running a fingernail along the bottom of the roll-up garage door. I thought I was imagining it until Madison sat bolt upright and whispered, Did you guys hear that? We all nodded. Then the knocking started, not loud, not hard, just persistent. A soft, deliberate tapping on the window, followed by another round of that weird, faint giggling. Rachel whispered, That's not your dad. I didn't answer, because I knew it wasn't. We jumped up and shoved a mattress against the first window. It barely helped. The giggling moved to the next one. We huddled in the bathroom, door open, just a crack. I was closest to the edge, peering out with my heart in my throat. The garage door rattled violently, like someone yanking it, trying to pull it open. The lock held, but the sound was wrong. Too erratic, too desperate, and that giggling never stopped. I don't even remember screaming, just that we all did, at once. My voice tore through my throat. I heard Rachel sobbing. Lena had buried her face in Madison's hoodie. Then, silence. A split second later, I saw my dad sprinting toward the garage in boxers and a t-shirt, flashlight in hand. Then a car engine. Headlights lit up the side road behind the property. A dark sedan peeled out, tires squealing. By the time we got outside, it was gone. The police came, took statements. My dad was livid that he hadn't heard sooner. We hadn't locked the bathroom window, and they said that's probably how the person had been watching us, quietly, for who knows how long. No prints, no plates, no real lead. My birthday sleepovers went back inside the house. We never talked about it much after that. Not in depth. The school year rolled on, friendships changed, we all moved on. Sort of. But I never stayed in the garage again. Not for 2 whole years. And even after, it was never the same. I had always been a homebody, the kind of kid who didn't do well sleeping in unfamiliar places. My parents used to joke that even the idea of a hotel bed gave me anxiety. But at 10 years old, something in me wanted to be braver. I wanted to be like the other girls in my class who swapped stories of sleepovers, whispered secrets under blankets, and stayed up late watching scary movies and laughing until someone's mom came in and told them to hush. So when my best friend Callie invited me over for her birthday sleepover, I said yes. Not immediately. I hesitated for a good 2 days, but eventually I said yes. It felt like a small but personal victory. Callie and I had known each other since we were 5. Her family had moved into a neighborhood on the far edge of town called Briar Ridge. It was one of those newer developments outside of Asheville, about a 30-minute drive from where I lived with my parents. Her house sat on the edge of a large, slightly wooded cul-de-sac. It was a beautiful place, but it always felt a little too quiet to me. No traffic, no neighbor noise. Just wind in the trees and the occasional bark of a distant dog. Callie was the youngest of 4 siblings. Her older sister was away at college and her 2 brothers were teenagers, one of whom, Mason, was 19 and lived at home full-time due to his severe autism. I had only met Mason once before, and though he didn't speak much and kept mostly to himself, there was something unpredictable about him. I wouldn't say he scared me, but being around him made me uneasy. I remember his intense stares, the way he'd hover just behind a doorway without saying a word. "He won't bother us," Callie had said casually, when I asked if Mason would be home during the sleepover. He mostly stays upstairs or in his room. He likes puzzles and white noise stuff. That reassured me a little, just enough. The plan was simple. There would be 3 of us, Callie, me, and another girl named Harper, who lived down the street from her. Callie's mom said we could sleep downstairs in the family room so we could stay up watching movies without bothering anyone. I was the first to arrive. Harper came an hour later. The sun was starting to set as we hauled our sleeping bags and pillows down to the lower level. Callie's basement wasn't like a regular basement. It had big windows that looked out onto a deck and a backyard lined with trees. I noticed right away that there were no curtains on the large windows. Just glass, and beyond that, darkness slowly creeping in. We set up camp in a sort of L shape. Harper laid out her air mattress in the middle of the floor. Callie had a pile of blankets in the corner near the bookshelf, and I chose the leather sectional couch near the window. I told myself not to think about it too much. It was just a window, and nothing was out there. We spent the early evening doing typical sleepover things, painting nails, eating popcorn, gossiping about boys. Callie put on The Princess Bride, and we watched half of it before Harper fell asleep mid-conversation. Callie and I stayed up a bit longer, but soon she was yawning too, and I was left on the couch, blinking at the dim glow of the TV. The house was quiet. I could hear the low hum of the refrigerator upstairs and the faint sound of someone walking around, probably one of Callie's parents heading to bed. Or maybe Mason. That made me a little nervous again, but I reminded myself that her room was upstairs and ours was separated by a whole floor. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep. I woke up suddenly. I didn't know what time it was, but the TV was still glowing, casting blue-white light over the room. My heart was pounding in that disoriented way it does when you wake up in a strange place. I shifted slightly, trying not to make noise. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Outside the window on the deck was a man, a tall man, sitting in one of the patio chairs, facing directly toward us. My breath caught. I didn't move. The way he was sitting, completely still, legs crossed, hands folded on his lap, made something inside me twist. He wasn't looking at the stars or the trees. He was staring inside, watching us, watching me. At 10 years old, I didn't know what adrenaline felt like. But I knew then. I stayed completely frozen. He didn't seem to notice I was awake. His face wasn't totally clear, just an outline in the shadows. But he had dark hair, and he was smirking, like he knew something we didn't. His head tilted slightly like he was enjoying a private joke. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream, to wake up Callie and Harper. But I didn't. Instead, I did the one thing my instincts screamed at me to do. I slowly turned onto my side, facing the cushions, and squeezed my eyes shut. I pretended I never saw him. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 50. I kept counting in my head, trying to keep my breathing even. At some point, I fell asleep again. Or blacked out. I'm not sure which. When I woke up, sunlight was pouring into the room. The spot on the deck was empty. No sign of him. No chair out of place, nothing broken, nothing unusual. But I knew what I saw. I didn't say anything at first. Not over breakfast when Callie's mom made pancakes. Not while we were brushing our teeth or packing up our sleeping bags. Not until we were getting ready to leave and Harper mentioned having a dream that someone was watching us. Callie laughed it off, calling it sleepover paranoia. But I saw a flicker of something cross her face. She looked at me. "Did you see anything last night?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Someone was on the deck," I whispered. "A man. He was watching us." Her face went pale. We didn't talk about it again. I don't think her mom believed us. I'm not sure Callie wanted to believe it herself. For a while I convinced myself it had to be Mason. But Mason was blonde. The man on the deck had dark hair. And Mason didn't smirk like that. Ever. I never slept at Callie's again. We stayed friends for a few more years, but something changed after that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone knew we were there, that we'd been targeted somehow. Years later, when I was 16, I stumbled across an old online forum for missing persons and unsolved crimes in Asheville. I didn't even know what I was looking for, just that I wanted to see if anything had happened in that neighborhood. I found a single post from 2012, a year after our sleepover. Unidentified man seen peering through windows in the Briar Ridge development. No arrests, no leads. Residents advised to keep doors locked and install outdoor lighting. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed awake longer, if I had woken the other girls, if I had gone to the window and looked him in the eye. But mostly, I try not to wonder at all, because I still remember his smirk and I still don't know if he ever came back. Oh. I was 21 years old when this happened, and to this day I still can't think about it without getting that same cold knot in my stomach. At the time, I had just moved out of my parents' house for the very first time. My new apartment wasn't fancy, just a small one-bedroom unit on the ground floor of a quiet suburban neighborhood called Brookhaven Terrace. The rent was cheap, the neighbors were polite but mostly kept to themselves, and the area felt safe enough that I didn't worry much about locking every window or checking over my shoulder. I worked the evening shift at a coffee shop, usually from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., so my routine was pretty simple. Come home, shower, grab a snack, and unwind with a show or video game until I got sleepy. I was young, independent for the first time, and honestly felt like nothing bad could ever happen to me. Looking back now, that false sense of security nearly got me killed. It was late spring, one of those perfect nights where the air feels cool and crisp after a long, warm day. My little apartment didn't have air conditioning, so I had a habit of opening my bedroom window in the evenings to let some breeze in while I slept. The window was low to the ground, probably only a couple of feet up, and it faced the narrow side yard where a wooden fence separated my building from the neighbors. There was a screen on the window, but it wasn't one of those heavy-duty ones, just a thin frame that snapped into place. Still, in my head, that was secure enough. I remember thinking, who would bother breaking into this place? That night, I had stayed up a little later than usual, around 1:30 a.m., watching random videos on my laptop in bed. Eventually, my eyes grew heavy, so I plugged my phone in, set my alarm for the morning, and fell asleep with the cool night air drifting through the open window. It was so peaceful, until it wasn't. The first thing that woke me up wasn't a sound, it was a smell. Cigarette smoke. It hit me like a strange, sharp intrusion in the dark. My eyes fluttered open slowly at first, groggy and disoriented. For a second, I thought maybe it was coming from outside. My upstairs neighbor sometimes smoked on his balcony, but this was different. It wasn't faint, it was strong, heavy, close. Then I heard it. The faint scratch of something against wood and the soft exhale of breath. My stomach dropped. I reached out in the dark to turn on the lamp on my nightstand, and that's when my hand brushed against something. Someone. Warm skin. A shoulder. My entire body froze. By the time my brain caught up with what was happening, I was already wide awake, heart slamming against my ribs, breath caught in my throat. There was a man sitting on the edge of my bed. A stranger, shirtless, smoking a cigarette, and staring right at me. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there calm, like he belonged there. His eyes were glassy, dark circles hanging underneath like he hadn't slept in days. I could see the faint glow of the cigarette tip as he took another slow drag, his face illuminated for just a split second. I remember whispering, my voice cracking, "What the hell, who are you? Get out." He tilted his head slightly like he was amused. Then finally he spoke, his voice low and rough. "Didn't mean to wake you." Those words chilled me to my core because of how casual they were, like this was normal for him. I screamed then, Instinct took over. I bolted upright, shoving him hard and yelling, "Get out! Get the hell out!" He stumbled back, more startled than angry, and in 2 quick moves he darted toward the open window. He didn't even use the door, just yanked the screen aside and disappeared into the night like a shadow. I slammed the window shut so hard I thought the glass would break. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I shoved the lock into place, dragged my heavy bookcase in front of it, and stood there for what felt like forever, heart pounding, staring at the window like he was going to come back any second. When I finally gathered the courage to peek outside, I saw the window screen propped neatly against the side of the building. He'd removed it without bending the frame or making a sound. That terrified me even more because it meant he'd done this before. Maybe not here, but somewhere. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I didn't even sit down. I kept every light on, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for dawn. The next morning in the daylight, everything looked so normal that it made me question my own sanity. But the screen was there, just like I remembered. That wasn't a dream. That happened. I reported it to my landlord, who basically shrugged and told me to keep your windows locked from now on. The police took a report, but nothing ever came of it. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Only this time, it was worse. It was a Saturday, and my parents were out of town for a family event I couldn't attend because of work. My siblings were at school during the day, so for most of the weekend I was completely alone. Around 10 a.m., I was sitting in the living room on the main PC, gaming like I always did when I had a day off. My parents had this old school rule when I lived at home about not having electronics in my bedroom, and even after moving out, the habit stuck. I always gamed in the living room. I was so focused on the screen that I didn't notice the faint click of the front door unlocking. At first, I thought maybe I imagined it, until I heard the door creak open slowly. I spun around, heart skipping. The front door was wide open. For a second, I thought maybe my mom or dad had come back early and forgotten to tell me. I yelled, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. I texted both of them, still out of town. Every hair on my body stood on end. I walked slowly toward the door, half expecting someone to jump out, but there was no one there. The driveway was empty. The street was empty. I closed the door, locked it, and told myself maybe I'd forgotten to lock it after taking the trash out. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. Then I heard it. A faint zipper sound coming from down the hall, from my bedroom. I should have left the house right then and there. But stupid curiosity, or maybe shock, made me walk toward the sound. My bedroom door was cracked open. I pushed it slowly, and everything looked normal at first glance. Then I noticed my temporary garment rack, the one I'd been using because my old closet had mold issues, was slightly shifted. The zipper sound came again, louder this time. I walked closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then, with trembling hands, I unzipped the fabric covering just an inch and froze. There was a man inside, the same man, holding a knife. His face lit up when he saw me and he whispered, "Hey." That was all I needed to hear. I ran. I didn't think. I just bolted down the hall, slammed my bedroom door shut, grabbed the house phone from the living room, and sprinted outside. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before finally locking the door from the outside. I called 911 from the driveway, my voice breaking as I told them someone was inside my house. The cops got there in minutes, but it felt like hours. They went in with guns drawn while I stood in the street crying and clutching the phone. When they brought him out in handcuffs, my knees nearly gave out. It was him, the same man who had been in my bedroom 2 weeks earlier. He didn't look scared. He didn't look angry. He looked empty, like getting caught didn't matter to him. One of the officers later told me he'd been looking for me all over the house when they found him. That night still haunts me because I can't stop thinking, what if I hadn't heard the zipper? What if I had gone to bed? Would I even be here right now? I don't live on the ground floor anymore. I don't sleep with windows open. Hell, sometimes I even check my closets twice before bed, because once something like that happens to you, you never truly feel safe again.